right. Am I on?
You are on.
Okay. Oops, not share. Let's get this. All right. Okay. So as Steve said, I am hailing from Codeword. And so I'm going to kind of go through a bunch of things here. If you want to hear more about any of it, please come to the Q&A. I'm happy to answer. I've been here before. I don't know if any of you have participated in that, but a lot of my remarks today, I'm going to kind of go down a certain path with this, and it's largely framed around kind of my experience with BYU students over the last 2 years and that particular presentation. So anyway, my Twitter handle, if you want to follow me, is @Jeff Lind. And yeah, feel free to ever reach out there. Let's see. All right. So who are we at Codeword? We're an agency that creates effective communication programs by combining content, public relations, community building, and boundless creativity. So that's a lot of like media buzzwords to really talk about. We're a digital ad agency. Agencies have really, the way the media landscape is now, almost everything you produce is a piece of, a brand will produce is a piece of content, and almost everything they push out has some form of public relations involved with it. So the internet has democratized media in a certain way to make everything, brands closer to the consumer, and as a result, media even more important, and media relations kind of, an essential thing that all brands have to focus on and think about. So this is what we believe. Brand communications don't have to suck. They often do, but they don't have to. We always aim to find this X of where, what the audience finds interesting intersects with what the brand wants to say. We have 3 offices. We're based in San Francisco. Our first office was based in San Francisco. Our second office we opened a couple years after that in New York City, in Manhattan. And then most recently, 2 years ago, we opened our third office here. And it says SLC, but you guys are pretty savvy, so it's actually Thanksgiving Point. So these are the various things we do: strategy, PR, editorial design, and account management. We try to hire non-agency people. We like the way they attack problems differently than people that have lived in the agency world their entire life. But these are the kind of areas that we specifically focus on for big brands. And these are the kind of brands we work with. These are all clients of ours. We work with Qualcomm, Google, Imager, Make, Sphero, all sorts of really cool, YouTube. If you know, as BYU students, you know a little bit about Simple Citizen, hopefully. They're actually all come from BYU, and a really cool success story. So here's some of the work we've done. If you've ever gone to Google and looked at the top of a page and seen the doodle that changes, whether it's a holiday or things like that, our animation design department has worked on lots of those. We've worked on things like this. The great thing about what we do is we work with Google's Creative Lab, which is their whole mission is to build the brand of Google, which gives marketers actually a really cool opportunity because you can pitch almost anything you want, and if it builds that brand, they'll give you money to do it. So we work, in this particular case, we work with the Academy of Electronic Music. For those of you that like EDM or DJing, Armin van Buuren came as our dean of students, and he was there every day teaching people how to DJ, which was pretty cool. Then Simple Citizen is a BYU student, like I said. They're the TurboTax of immigration. We actually had a really cool, what we've done for them is a hybrid of content and PR, and actually today was kind of a fun day for them. With all the Donald Trump stuff going on in the election, all the comments about immigration and things, we actually put together a little graphic for him, and it got picked up by some national media. And so that's the kind of stuff we do. It's basically you get to have an opportunity to really get creative and have fun with things. So if you check Gawker today, they're listed as just like that. So, like I said, I came here, well, let me back up a little bit. So I started my career at Goldman Sachs, and I was a finance student here. And back when I did that, working on Wall Street was a pretty coveted job, especially, like now tech has turned into this really amazing place to get. But when I graduated, finance, especially in finance, the crown jewel was Goldman Sachs, and working particularly in New York City. And so I spent a lot of time, and I think one of the most pivotal points of my time at BYU was learning how to network. So fast forward to me living in Utah again. The last 2 years I've worked mentoring BYU students here and there. I have office hours. If any of you ever want to come talk to me, I have office hours every week that I'm happy to chat with you about whatever you want to, whether it's business, a tech idea, finance, I don't care what it is, the Utah Jazz, which I love to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it. But one of the things I've realized over that much time is that, you know, what I learned as getting my job at Goldman Sachs was something that could be applied pretty broadly to you. Because, like I said, I've mentored BYU students for the past years, and really what I've found is most of you are really bad at networking. You think you're really good at it, but you're often really bad at it. And it's usually just a couple little tweaks. You know, it's changing the 20% of the things that make you 80% better. But this is what I want to talk about today. So, getting my first job, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. But first I want to tell you a little story kind of illustrating what I was talking about. So a few months ago, I had a BYU student come and see me. And we were talking about various things, and he was really trying to get a handle on what he wanted to do in his career. And we started talking. And it was pretty clear that he didn't really understand what I did or where I had come from or even looked at my LinkedIn bio. Because we started chatting and, you know, I said, so what, you know, what are you struggling with right now? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you want to do? You know, where do you want to work? He's like, well, I'm not really a 9-to-5 kind of guy. And I said, what kind of guy are you? You know, and he was like, well, you know, I really want to just, you know, build a business and have something really take off and just go great, and I'll make my money there. And I said, you know, there's a couple things with that. One, if you're not a 9-to-5 kind of guy, I've got really bad news for you, because building a business as an entrepreneur is basically like a 24-hour job. And the second thing is, you clearly don't know me very well, because you saw that I worked at Goldman Sachs, which, you know, again, is not a 9-to-5 sort of thing. That's like a 7 a.m. to midnight type of thing. So you don't really understand my background either. And so it really started drilling in that point to me, like, you need to understand a few things about who you're talking to if you really want good advice. So let me give you a few quick tips before we get into all this. One, when it comes to networking, embrace your millennial nature. So millennials get a pretty bad rap. They do in my industry, they do in every industry. If you hear a lot about millennials feeling like they deserve too much and all this kind of stuff. So you guys are like a battered generation a little bit by like old guys like me. But one thing you guys are millennials are particularly amazing at that I think you really should embrace is your confidence. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from somebody is, no one knows how much confidence you have, so take as much as you want. Be confident as you get ready to kind of implement some of this stuff. Go out there and really, you know, embrace your millennial nature. Call people, get in front of them, ask for lunches, go, you know, to all these kind of events, different things like that. Really get in front of people, because networking is really all about getting out there, finding somebody that's interested in you and that you're interested in them, and learning from them. So get in front of people. 2, understand the inevitability of work. You know, for 99% of you, you know, the first job you have is going to be really, really hard. And that can be, you know, I remember when I went on my mission, the first day tracting we went out, my trainer was like, leave your watch home. And I was like, okay. And so I did, and at the time I didn't know why. We got out there, we tracked it for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 hours. We were just knocking doors. I was in Boston at the time. And we finished these doors, and I was like, hey, can we go in for lunch? I think it's about that time. He's like, what time do you think it is? I said, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2. He's like, yeah, it's 10:45. We've got another couple hours ahead of us. And I just remember, you know, I learned something from that, and I feel like it translates really well to your first job especially, is that there's some psychological warfare going on. There's just a lot of work, whether it's sitting in your desk, being in front of a computer for a really long time, whether it's like digging through documents forever, whether it's doing a ton of research. I mean, your first job is going to be really hard. So there's no way to avoid it really, unless you kind of hit the lottery, which I mean that literally or figuratively was something that you come up with. But for most of us, our first job is really hard. So embrace the inevitability of that work. And then this is my personal piece of advice. I don't know if I know a lot of people don't feel like this, but people are always looking for something that like really suits them, you know, they'll fall in love with. I did not love my first job. It was like misery on wheels. But you know, don't look for something that you'll love. Find a tough role that you can learn to be excellent at. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, you know, if you have a tough role, other people don't necessarily want it. It has self-selecting properties. And if you get really good at it, then you become super valuable to the organization or the broader industry group that you're in. For me, for example, at Goldman, I really focused on getting really, really, really good at Excel. And you know, I know that like when I went in, I definitely had Excel expert on my resume. which one of the guys that interviewed me laughed at that. But I really, as I sat actually next to a guy that previously had worked in IT, and he was an Excel expert, and I watched him work, and I was like, whoa, I want to be that guy. And so I asked him to help me, and he did. He just gave me like consistent help, and to the point that I actually learned how to read macros, write macros, do a bunch of Visual Basic stuff, and get pretty advanced in the area, at least advanced enough that I was better than 99% of the people that did it. And then all the jobs I went to after that in finance, I was the guy that trained everybody, which I think, and I'm not a computers guy. I wasn't really a finance guy when I started. In fact, my first finance class at BYU, I got a D in. And I retook it. So, that was something that was really hard for me that I felt like I really dug down and learned how to do. And I think that actually can end up being a real blessing for you. So, let me talk a little bit about my job. So, it all started at BYU for me. So, I was sitting in a class a lot like this, and I don't know if they even still have it. It's the mentoring class. Do you guys still have that? Where you have to pick a mentor, and it's basically like a prereq to all the business classes, or it was at the time. And I was sitting there, and I knew two things going into the business school at BYU. And that was that I wanted to work at Goldman Sachs, and I wanted to work in New York. And so I'm sitting in this class, and I remember, they talked about there's a limited amount of mentors, and that you need to have one, and you need to go through this thing. And right when they said there's a limited amount, I stood up, walked out, went to the computer lab, and I started looking in this thing because I knew there was a limited amount. And so I dug through it, and I used the search tool, and I searched specifically for a BYU graduate that worked in New York at Goldman Sachs. So that's kind of how it all kicked off. This is the middle of my beginning of my junior year. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you guys is be qualified. I put this, and interesting also helps. So I didn't know how a good graphical representation of that, so that's me in front of the pyramids, which I thought was interesting. So the first part of networking that I think is really key is being qualified for whatever position you're looking for. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to be qualified that moment, but that means you need to be working towards it and doing things, and making actionable steps to get qualified in that space. Interesting helps. And I put this particular picture because I went to BYU Jerusalem as a freshman, and we ended up playing. I was walking through the old city, and this guy kind of sidled up to me and was like, he's like, "You from the Mormon University?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "Do you play basketball?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "You have a team?" I was like, "Yes." And so he wrote down on this piece of paper and handed it to me. He said, "Be here." And I was like, "Okay." So I went back to the university. I gathered up a team of a bunch of, like tall Mormon dudes. And we set off this one night down to the old city. And it was inside the old city. We went in, wound our way through, and we came into this gate that we kind of pushed through. And on the old city walls, one side was the old city wall, and there was just an old stone wall. There was a full-size basketball court with people in the stands and refs standing there. And it was the Palestinian national basketball team. And so they wanted to play us. They were getting ready for the Olympics, and so they wanted to play us. So we played them, and we beat them. So, which was great. And they wanted to play again, and then we played it again, and they beat us. And then we played them one more time, and we beat them again. So the moral of the story is I put this at the bottom of my resume, and I would go in there. This is when I was new, and when I was interviewing and things, and every single time, no one cared about anything else I had ever done. The first question always came was, "Tell me about this basketball game." So being interesting helps. But in the meantime, be qualified for what you're doing. So one, get relevant work experience now. Then this is the way, by the way, to be qualified. Get relevant work experience. I don't care if you're, like I was in finance, for example, and that's where I was headed to. I got an internship with a local accounting office, and they were tiny. It was for grabber screws, and they really took a chance on me because I was worthless. But I went in there, and I just did paperwork and things like that. But I know later on, it actually, when I went to apply for my job, it showed that I had an interest in the field, that I had some form of understanding of what I would be doing, and it was really, really helpful. That dovetails into get relevant internships, and that's even if they're small. It doesn't matter, but try and get experience that helps. I can't tell you how many times I have people come up to me and they say things like, and they show me their resume, and there's absolutely nothing on it, or it's all sales jobs or things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that by any means. In fact, sometimes I wish I would have made some good money on a couple sales jobs. But the closer you get to graduation in whatever field you're looking for, you need to start getting relevant experience because you're going to start networking with people that are going to judge you based on that experience. And if it's just sales stuff, they're not going to be, or just something completely unrelated, I don't mean to pick on sales, it may not be as valuable as it is to have something that is in the field that they can see that you know what you're talking about. Do cool things. You know, when you're at BYU, especially like somebody like me, I'm a 6'1" white guy that doesn't have any particularly discernible skills. You know, I'm not that cool in this group. I mean, I'm sure many of you have done more cool things than I have. But the thing is, and this is like the dirty secret with Mormons, not so dirty secret, I should say, you guys individually are really, really interesting. When you sprinkle you out into the world, you've done a lot of stuff. Like the 8 years of piano that your mom made you take, a lot of people don't have a mom making them take 8 years of piano, or like going to like BYU Jerusalem, or doing the kind of things you do, your language skills, your missionary experience, things like that. There's relevant things. So do cool things beyond that. Travel the world. You know, I think that there's interesting people that have been to a lot of places and had experiences on other continents and other countries that are really interesting. Wherever you are and whatever you can do, add cool things to your resume. Be qualified and be interesting. And I put this here, be the kind of person you want to sit by for 12 hours a day, which sounds really stupid. But I'm convinced that's why I got hired at Goldman initially when I finally got my interviews, is because I was kind of like, I got in there, they knew if you have an interview eventually, they know you're qualified. So the next thing they're trying to tick off the box is if you're actually worth sitting by or interesting in any way. I talked to one of my bosses there, ended up being my boss, about how much I hated the Yankees. And we commiserated on that for 30 minutes, and then I went to my next interview. And I was like, well, that was a waste of time. And later I found out he like loved me because of that. And it was because he really knew. He knew I passed the bar, you know, with the qualifications, being in that chair with him. And what he was really looking for is, do I want to sit by this guy? How will he show to clients? Can I send him around the firm? All that kind of stuff. That's interesting to them. Okay, next thing is find a willing mentor. So this is Dave Smith. This is that guy that I found when I sat down in that class and ran off and found him. He changed my entire career and probably my entire life. So I was applying, literally, I was applying for internships at Pizza Hut corporate headquarters. So I don't know if I was going to be a really glorified pizza boy or what, but that's what I was applying for when I got this opportunity. So Dave is an essential guy to my success. And he actually works in the Salt Lake Goldman office now. So here's the interesting thing about your mentor, right? Successful people want to mentor smart students. They're looking for it. I enjoy mentoring smart kids. I really love talking to people that have drive, have initiative, and want to go and want to do cool things. That's a fun person to talk to. I love when they follow up with me and tell me what they've done as a result of what we've worked on. And these people do too. They're successful people in whatever field you're in want to talk to you because no one got to where they are without having somebody that was genuinely interested in what they did. You need to respect their time. So let me continue this story. So I got Dave's information. I sent him an email for that class. And this was, like I said, this was a year and a half before I needed the internship. And he wrote back to me pretty quickly and said, I'd love to meet with you. And, I don't always do a lot of things right in my life, but I did this right. And I said, look, I'd love to spend 15 minutes with you and talking about my resume. I'm preparing to apply for jobs or for internships. I'd really like your opinion on a couple things. And he was like, great, here's a time. So I then sent him the resume. I called him. I spent 15 minutes going through it with him. And at the end of it, we hung up. But before we hung up, I said, is it okay if in another month or so, I contact you again and we talk through a few more questions I might have or some follow-up to this resume conversation? He was like, great, that'll be awesome. And we hung up. That was like a key moment in the networking experience. And I'll get to this in a few minutes. But the fact that I was contacting him so early and I was respecting his time, and I told him what I was going to do, I did what I said, and moved on, and then followed up with it, that was key, and it set up the groundwork for the next year of our mentorship. So so I say respect their time is one thing. Do your homework and research. And what I mean by that is know who this person is when you get on the phone with them. Know what you're going to ask them. Have kind of questions that you want to get into. The worst thing you can do is just go to them and then, like that one kid came to me and said, well, I'm not really a 9-to-5 kind of guy. If he would have looked at my bio at all, he would have known I am a 9-to-5 kind of guy. And I respect 9-to-5 kind of guys, and he probably would have taken a different tact with me. So do your homework and research on it. And, for example, Dave was in the controller's department. I found that out. I really dug into what that is, the different departments of Goldman Sachs, what he did specifically. And you don't have to know everything, but I knew enough that I could ask smart questions so that he felt like he was giving a value exchange. Like I truly came with real questions that I wanted to know, and he truly gave me answers that would get me somewhere. And that's when I said there are dumb questions. Dumb questions are things like, just things that they would have no interest in talking about. I don't believe that there are no dumb questions, because especially in this case, if you haven't done your homework, you can ask some dumb things. Set goals, and in particular, set long-term goals for what you want out of this. And I don't mean set it with the mentor. You can as you go along, but even in your own mind, what do you want out of this mentorship? What do you want out of this individual? Like, have a purpose for talking to him, and it'll guide all your conversations. And it'll help so much to get you to where you actually want to be at the end of all this. All right, so that was how I found Dave. That's how I got to know him. And then know the long game. And you guys might be too young for Lost, but this is from an episode called The Long Con. But I didn't think con was a good word to use at BYU. So, know the long game here. And this is the long networking game. So, what I mean by that is the other thing I did right with this relationship with Dave was that I started really early. Too many students come to me the week before they need an internship, a month before they need an internship, a week before they're graduating and need a job. If you're waiting till you need something to get a mentor, it's too late, because there's not going to be a valuable mentorship there. You're just showing up to get something, and I don't know you. So that's a really, really valuable thing to do. So like I said, have a long goal with the short-term goals in mind. Be purposeful in your networking. Like I said, I went after Dave because at least I knew those two things, that I wanted to work in New York and I wanted to work for Goldman Sachs. He fit both those things, and I thought he could be a gatekeeper to get me there. I asked smart questions that led to smart answers and opportunities. That's the thing. So as we went through this mentorship, after that first month, like I said in the last slide, follow up. And follow up smartly. Don't be too aggressive, but don't also let it slide off your plate and never remember. Every month I would contact him. I would send him an email a couple months ahead of time, or a couple weeks ahead of time, and be like, Dave, I'd love to talk to you about X, Y, Z. Do you have some time? He was like, great, yeah, let's talk about it. I said, cool, it'll only be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. Then I get on the phone, do it. To spend 30 minutes, get off. And then at the end of every call, I'd say the same thing. Can I contact you again in a month? He was like, great. We kept doing this over and over, and this was like a relationship we ended up building. By the time I was in like the 6th or 7th phone call with him, we were actually laughing together. He knew about my family, I knew about him, I knew how many kids he had, all these kinds of things. We actually had a real relationship. So suddenly, the equation switched here, where I'm not just going to him to get something, but he's invested time in me, and now he's got some skin in the game too to see my success. And that's like a key principle to it, is like you want to get to that point where they have a vested interest in seeing you succeed. Because like I said, they want a mentor, and they want to mentor successful people. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy if you let it happen. Follow up, and then make it easy to recommend you. Part of that's being qualified, like I said, and that's a big chunk of it. But the other part is, do everything else you can to make it simple to recommend you. Find out if there's interviews happening. Find out where you want to be. Again, having that goal in mind and working towards it with your questions you have for them. Make it easy for them to make the final decision on it. And then put yourself in a position to be lucky. I don't want to undermine the importance of luck. I think the 3 big principles for me in networking are work your guts out, be qualified, and then get lucky. And you can't control the lucky part, but you can put yourself in a position to be as lucky as you possibly can, and to have good breaks come your way. And don't tell my design department I just stole stock art off the internet to put it up. They'll be very disappointed in me. Let's see. There we go. All right. This is probably one of the most valuable principles I've ever learned, and I've learned it more as a mentor than I ever did as a mentee. But your mentor is thinking one thing when they're sitting down with you for the job is let's see, what did I say here? How will this affect my reputation? They broker in reputation, and this is true in any industry. If you're talking to people that are players in whatever you're into, these people, they live and die by their reputation. So if they recommend you and you're a schmuck, it does not show well for them. So don't be a schmuck. That's the key. Be qualified, be likable, be curious, and show growth over the mentoring period. And that puts you in a position to actually want to be recommended, and that they trust that you will take care of their reputation wherever you go with it. All right, so a recap of those things. Find a willing mentor, be qualified, know the long game, and put yourself in a position to be lucky. So, I don't know how much time I have, so I have to check so I can see how long-winded I should be here. All right. 15 minutes? Okay, so the first thing is, and these are kind of going, just as I was putting this all together, I just thought, okay, let me just say this in the end. So start early, right? If you wait until you need a job to begin networking, you're way too late. You're behind the game, and it's just never going to work out quite right. Proper networking is a part-time job. It takes a lot of time. And that's like kind of a sad reality for you guys, is that you're already doing school. A lot of you already have jobs. You know, some of you are taking 16 to 18 credits. It's kind of, you know, the last thing you need is one more thing. But if you're really going to get to where you want to be, you need to treat it almost like a part-time job. You need to be getting out in front of people like this. And at first, you know, I got lucky with Dave, and I had this really, you know, he dialed in really quickly. But sometimes you've got to start with 10 guys to whittle it down. It's a numbers game to getting to the guys that are really going to help you. So you got to get in front of a lot of people. You got to maintain a lot of relationships. You got to keep a lot of balls in the air and get to that point. You got to provide value to the mentor relationship. Like I said, the value to them ultimately is that you're going to really take care of their reputation when you get there, that they can trust that you're going to be the guy. This is, again, one of the biggest ones. Reputation is the single biggest asset you have professionally. And I still believe that with what I do now, too. I mean, we, at Codeword, we don't respond to RFPs. I don't know if any of you guys know what an RFP is, but it's a request for proposal. So basically, when a big brand in particular needs an agency or needs something done, they have a requirement. They have to reach out to a certain amount of groups, usually at least 3 to 5, get a request for proposal, then they compare them all. They can choose procurement, or whoever it is can choose, you know, what they're looking for, and then they can go with them. It's a slog, and it's really hard. It's basically an ongoing pitch contest. And we've been lucky to this point at Codeword. We've developed our entire brand off reputation. That's the Google brand and everything like that. When we started our first office in Manhattan, we brought over my business partner from JWT, which is one of the largest ad agencies in the world. And you know, the week after he started, we had phone calls from News Corp and Google that both were like, wanted to talk about if we could work with them in some capacity because of Kyle and his reputation. So, you know, that's the kind of stuff. And then from there, you do good work. Those people see it, especially in my industry. People see what you do. They see the content you produce. And immediately they're like, hey, where'd you get that? Like the Simple Citizen graphic today. They're getting calls right now, I know, that are saying, hey, who did that for you? Where'd that come from? And, you know, unless my reputation is tarnished, they will say, oh, we got it from Codeword, you got to go there. And that's how we built our whole business, and where we haven't had to respond to RFPs except when we really, really want to. So reputation, be mindful of that for them and for you. And then be really good, but be even better than you seem. So obviously your mentor is going to see how good you are, you know, throughout this process. And you can't hide mediocrity over, you know, years of talking to people. But you still, you know, what's even better than being good is surprising them and being even better and getting to where you got to and really surprising people. So let me kind of close the loop on that story. So Dave and I, we met, went through this dance of kind of just like getting to know each other better and better and better. When I finally got to the point where I knew internship season was upon us and we had gotten to a really good cadence with each other, you know, he brought it up to me. He said, well, what are you looking for at this point? Are you looking for an internship? And I said, yeah, I really want one. And he said, well, and he said, would you be willing to fly out to New York if we have an opening? And I said, anytime, anywhere. He was like, great. So 2 days later, he called me back, and he was like, we have an interview opening. Somebody fell through. Do you want to come? And I did. I was on a plane the next day, flew out there, paid my own way, you know, which there's oftentimes people are like, oh, the company should pay for me to get there. But in this case, I was like, I want that job. And I went. Flew out there, met Dave that day, the first time I'd ever seen his face. And I felt like we were old friends. We met. He took me up there. I had 16 interviews that day. And finished. And then before I got on the subway, got out, before I got to my hotel, I got a phone call from them offering me the job. And that was my internship at Goldman and how I started. So, you know, again, I wasn't, you know, being candid with you guys, I'm not the smartest kid that graduated from BYU. I was the only guy that got a job on Wall Street that year in New York. And I was I was worse, in fact, than most of the candidates that were probably going from BYU. And they were smart guys. They had networked. They'd done the right thing. I got the right guy, built the right relationship, and had some luck, and got the opportunity. And so that's why I say it comes down to you got to do all these things to put yourself in the position to be lucky. And when you are, it's magic.